Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, good morning. I am Andris Sprūds, Director of Latvian Institute of International Affairs and Professor at Riga Stradiņš University. And today, on behalf of the Institute and partners, I have a great pleasure to welcome all of you at the annual conference on the European Union. And I would say the largest annual EU-related conference in the Baltic states. And of course, this time, in the times of pandemic, it's a virtual event, as many events all around the world. Precisely a year ago, the coronavirus outbreak became a global pandemic. And precisely a year ago, on this day, Latvian government declared the national emergency. And shortly after, the whole Europe became the epicenter of the crisis. And since then, we and fellow Europeans live essentially in Europe, which is on hold, or even for some, Europe at war. Unsurprisingly, this has been a year of solidarity stress test for the European Union. We have faced challenges of border nationalism and vaccination choice and speed diversity across the community. At the same time, there are also positive signs. We have been able to arrive at a common approach on vaccine purchases, an unprecedented recovery plan. And we must not forget that traditional developments and challenges, great power, geopolitics, technological revolution, climate change don't cease to exist. And all those issues complicate and provide at the same time opportunities for the EU's agenda. And the results are arguably mixed so far. So the question is Europe getting better? And today's conversations with a distinguished set of international speakers is about finding answers and providing also recommendations, practical recommendations. So of course, we would like to see the EU as a part of the solution rather than a problem. However, attitudes of societies across the member states have been predominantly critical about the EU's ability to act efficiently during the pandemic. So we must admit that we also face a fundamental challenge, how to develop the community of the like-minded around apparently growing diversity rather than sameness, and how to engage also our own societies in these stressful and uneasy times. And of course, partnerships and cooperation always remain indispensable in the European politics, in European solidarity. But it's not less important in organizing also such an event, such a conference, such an endeavor, intellectual endeavor. So I would express my appreciation and of course also the organizers' appreciation to Latvian Parliament, representation of the European Commission in Latvia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, Institute of International Relations and Political Science at Vilnius University, and also Estonian Foreign Policy Institute at the ICDS. So these are instrumental partners. And it is always tradition since the very beginning already, since the launch of the EU, the Baltic EU conversations, that this conference takes place together with Latvian Parliament. And this partnership with Latvian Parliament demonstrates a strong and important linkage between national and European politics. The Parliament has demonstrated an increasing understanding of importance of engagement with society and also thorough debate. So that's why we are extremely delighted and honored to have a keynote speech by the Speaker of the Latvian Parliament, Ms. Ināra Mūrniece. So, Madam Speaker, the floor is yours.
Labrīt visiem!
Good morning, everyone. Honorable Mr. Dombrovskis, Honorable Mr. Sprūds, Mr. Zatlers, Mr. Kužnieks, Honorable Madam Tārauda, members of Parliament, experts, and everyone listening to us. I am glad to open the Baltic EU conversations in the Saima today, which is already the 6th time this event is taking place in the Latvian Parliament. We are starting these conversations at 9:01. Just like yesterday, we started our Saima sitting with a slight delay so that everyone can log on to the system on the eSaima platform. Thank you. I would especially like to thank the European Affairs Committee of the Saima, the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and the European Commission representation in Latvia for organizing the conference. I am truly pleased that Valdis Dombrovskis, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, has joined our conversation to provide an insight into the future of EU trade policy. Today, we will also talk about protecting the democratic values that the EU was built upon through the decades. We will discuss the ways to enable the recovery of our economy and to develop it with renewed vigor in an innovative, digital, green, and climate-friendly way. We will also talk about the ways to build a secure Europe and strong transatlantic relations. Recent Eurobarometer surveys show that almost half of Europeans have a positive view of the European Union. The main benefits of the EU mentioned in the survey are respect for democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, as well as the EU's influential role regarding economic, industrial, and trade aspects. With respect to the economic and social development of Europe, people in Latvia consider it important that a fair standard of living, equal opportunities, and access to the labor market, as well as, during these times, quality healthcare are ensured. These are the goals, but the question remains how to achieve them. What should be done at the national and at the European level? One thing is clear, only by working together will we be able to attain these goals. That is the strength of Europe. During the COVID-19 pandemic, all of Europe is in the same boat. We are all facing great challenges, and we also have to look for solutions together. Our current priority is the EU providing a swift response to the pandemic in the health sector, especially with regard to vaccines. Safe vaccines approved by the European Medicines Agency are increasingly available through the EU joint procurement mechanism. At the same time, of course, it raises questions about the decision-making process. What should have been done earlier, sooner, or in a different way in Latvia and in the EU to make vaccines more available to us? Now we must not hesitate to provide support to the economy and entrepreneurs. We must work hard to ensure that the funding available under the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility is injected in our economy without delay. We need to adopt clear decisions on sustainable investment projects and the reforms necessary to implement them so that the significant amount of EU funding can be meaningfully invested in Latvia and the Baltic region in the coming years. In regard to the EU's external relations, I would like to emphasize that the Baltic states must continue to stand in support of an active European neighborhood policy. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to the chairman of the Ukrainian parliament, Dmytro Razumkov. Around this time, 7 years will have passed since the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia. We, the Baltic states, and the whole international society must continue to stand strongly and staunchly for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Our support must also be unwavering for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia. In the neighboring Belarus, repressions are still carried out against peaceful demonstrators demanding democracy in the form of free and open elections. We are making active efforts so that the EU maintains a strong stance against the representatives of the Belarusian regime and those close to them who are responsible for this violence. It is our duty to help democratic civil society and independent journalists in Belarus. The parliaments of the Baltic states are traditionally in close cooperation with the parliamentarians of the Eastern Partnership countries. They are our friends. The Baltic experience can be useful in implementing necessary, but sometimes even painful democratic reforms in these countries. It is important for our friends in the Eastern Partnership region to receive encouragement and support, just as we did in the past. This year's Eastern Partnership Summit must provide a clear political perspective for the countries of the region on how to move closer to the EU, as well as set new practical goals for long-term cooperation. We must support the European integration efforts of the Eastern Partnership countries. I am convinced that the Baltic EU conversations in the summit today will serve as a good warm-up for the Conference of the Future of Europe, which will provide us with a wide-ranging debate on the ways to build the Europe of the future together and the form it should take in this changing world. May you all have valuable Baltic EU conversations. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for this long-lasting cooperation in organizing this conference and also the valuable insight that you provided regarding solidarity within the EU, which is truly important to us for us to be able to exit the crisis, for us to be able to evolve and develop ourselves further on. And as you mentioned, we cannot forget about our neighbors and that the politics are continuing in these regions and our values must be promoted in these regions as well. So we must continue cooperating with our partners. Thank you once again, Madam Speaker. And now I am glad to invite the next speakers.
I'm very happy to introduce and give floor to Andris Kuznieks, who is acting head of the European Commission representation. And I can once more also express my appreciation for already a long-standing cooperation, for long-standing support and very fruitful cooperation, also personally to Andris for his input. So Mr. Kuznieks, the floor is yours.
Good morning and many thanks, Andris. Madam Speaker, Executive Vice President, honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. In fact, this conference and today is very special for me because what a beautiful way to end my term here in Riga. It's my last working day in Riga, where I have spent 8 years in European Commission representation, and 2.5 of them I have been leading this institution. And another, I think, important aspect of this year's conference and feature is that we are organizing it in very true Baltic spirit, because you will hear panels and conversations organized from all 3 Baltic capitals. Of course, many other European capitals will be connected, but I think it's really true cooperation spirit. While working in Riga and when we discuss the crisis, I think I myself is I am very good example of this because I have served 3 Commission presidents, and I also am very happy that we will hear later in the afternoon President Barroso, the former president, who will speak with us. And over this course of 3 presidents and 8 years, I have witnessed myself all those crises we have been living through, starting from economic and financial crisis, continuing to Brexit, to terrorism. And by the way, terrorism was felt also here in Latvia, because when we started our presidency in 2015, in the very starting day, there was this Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack. We also witnessed Russia's war in Ukraine. And now we are faced with pandemic of COVID-19 and economic downturn. And we will discuss today, and you will discuss today and hear today discussions on how to bring back European economy on track, how to save lives, how to deal with all the new policies, how we make Europe more greener, more digital, more resilient to the future crisis. Where is our place in a global world? How we safeguard democracy and rule of law, and how we find our strategic autonomy. I think these are the questions, and in fact also the changes over those 8 years of the discussions we have been witnessing. And one could say that these crises have been different, but EU has been dealing with them. And I think despite all the fears, we can say that the crisis makes us stronger and better probably. but some questions have been pertinent over also all these 8 years in our agendas, and that is how to engage citizens, what is the future of the Europe, how we want to shape our Europe, how we involve citizens in those discussions. And I'm really very glad that just a few days ago, European institutions and member states gave start to the new process of the conference on the future of Europe. And in fact, I should compare Riga and Europe, because as you know, Riga is never ready. And I think Europe will never be ready, because we all need to try and make it better, but I think it will never be ready. And to end my opening remarks, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to Latvian Parliament, Madam Speaker Ināra Mūrniece, to Chair of European Affairs Committee, Vitanda Tērauda, and all the other colleagues, Latvian Institute of International Affairs, Andris and Kārlis, and all the colleagues who made this conference happen, Foreign Ministry, and also other institutes in Baltic states who are now the other two institutes who are actively involved in this conference. I think we all together will succeed, and I'm really wishing you very good discussions and productive debates. And to end and to say that if you are in Moscow, please let me know. I'll be EU diplomat in Moscow from the next week. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Kuznieks, thank you so much. It's really highly appreciated your support and our cooperation for 8 years. And of course, we will succeed. And absolutely, we also wish the most success for you in your future endeavors, especially in Moscow. It will be, I would assume, quite a challenging task as well. And I think you also indicated a couple of important things, the importance of engagement with society, the European debate with citizens of European Union. So I think, of course, it should be continued. And also this endeavor is with aim to engage with society, to inform society, to provide different opinions from different angles, and especially also in a Baltic perspective. And that's why, again, we appreciate your support and also the willingness of our partners from Lithuania and Estonia to engage, to be part of this endeavor, to be part of sort of intellectual debate, which also aims to inform society and to engage society. So thank you so much. Thank you once more to our partners, once more to Madam Speaker, to Mr. Kuznieks. And I am happy to move and to give the floor to Ms. Margarita Šešelgyte, who is Director of the Institute of International Relations and Political Science at Vilnius University, with the first panel with Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Dombrovskis. So Margarita, the floor is yours. And once more, of course, I wish to all of us and to you the successful and interesting and dynamic debate. Please, Margarita, you have the opening chance to start dynamic moderation and conversation with Mr. Dombrovskis. Please, Margarita.
Thank you, Andrew, so much. I'll try to do the best. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first panel of the Baltic EU Conversations 2029, which is posing a very relevant, serious, and somehow health-related question. Is Europe getting better? And before I'll introduce our keynote speaker, I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of administrative remarks. Panel will last 45 minutes. There will be a conversation with a keynote speaker for about half an hour or a bit less, and then I will open the floor for the questions and answers, questions from the audience, and you have two ways to pose the question. For those who are watching us on Zoom platform, just please raise your hand. I will see your hand, and then you will be given the floor to ask your question. For those who are watching us online, please pose your question on Slido platform, and the code of the slide platform is #92396. And now it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, which I'm sure doesn't need any introduction in the Baltic states, and not only, also in Europe and in the wider world. a person who successfully navigated Latvia through the crisis, through the recovery after the crisis in 2008, and also who successfully managed after this crisis to integrate Latvia into the Eurozone, and author of the world-known book, How Latvia Came Through a Financial Crisis, which was written in 2011. A former Prime Minister of Latvia, a former Financial Minister of Latvia, the member of European Parliament, a member of the Latvian Parliament, and now currently already for the second time, a Vice President of the European Commission, this time responsible for the Euro, social dialogue, also in charge of financial stability, financial services, and capital market union. What a rich portfolio. Mr. Dombrovskis, the floor is yours. And mute yourself. The microphone is not working.
Labrīt, tere hommikust, labas rītas.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Šešelgyte. And before I begin with my speech, I would like to thank Andris Kuznieks for the excellent cooperation I have enjoyed with him as a acting head of representation and before as a deputy head of the European Commission representation in Latvia. Well, actually, I know Andris since 2002, when I started to work as a finance minister in Latvia, and Andris was a director for EU funds. So I wish you all the success in your next steps in career. There is certainly room for more European values in Russia, so I wish you all the best in this mission. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to participate in this year's Baltic conversation, and I congratulate the organizers for demonstrating the best of Baltic cooperation, organizing one great event for all three Baltic states. The theme of this year's conference asks the question, is Europe getting better? And broadly speaking, I am convinced that the answer is yes. Of course, the process of Europe getting better does not follow the straight line. There are obstacles and setbacks. Sometimes we have to take one step back to take two steps forward. But the overall direction remains the right one for the Baltic region and for the European Union as a whole. Well, Dr. Šešelgyte already introduced my different portfolios, but my portfolio has shifted since, and now I'm also responsible for trade. So I will talk today about trade policy and the contribution trade is making in this respect. The European Union is the world's leading exponent of open, fair, and rules-based trade. We remain committed to the idea that trade between nations, underpinned by strong rules, drives peace and prosperity. Indeed, this is a founding idea of the European Union itself. We have expanded this approach with trade partners around the globe. We now have 46 agreements covering 78 countries, the best trade network in the world. And this is helping to make Europe better. Because these deals provide expanded opportunities for our exporters. They give a wider choice to EU consumers. They will help us to recover from the crisis. And trade agreements increase our international standing. The figures support this claim. Our trade surplus is approximately 300 billion euros, a real economic success story. Exports support 35 million jobs in the EU. This is 1 in 6 jobs. And these are better paid jobs, about 12% higher than average. Dear Baltic friends, trade plays a particularly important role in the economy of Baltic states. 21% of jobs in Latvia depend on exports outside the EU. The figure is even higher in Estonia and Lithuania, 22 and 26% respectively. Most of these exporters are SMEs, the backbone of our economy. In the Baltic region, more than 120,000 jobs are directly generated by foreign direct investment from countries outside the EU. There are numerous examples of Baltic success stories, companies that are benefiting from global trade. Looking to the future, we believe EU trade policy can generate even more opportunities for our companies on global markets. Our new EU trade strategy aims to get maximum benefit from our trade deals. It is especially important that our companies gain more value from our deals, particularly our SMEs. We have recently launched a dedicated online portal called Access to Markets, a one-stop shop to help our SMEs reach new markets. And we have launched a new streamlined complaints system to give our SMEs proper support when they face unjust market barriers abroad. As part of our new strategy, we have published a detailed EU agenda for the reform of the World Trade Organization because global trade requires global rules. We will work with our partners to update the global rulebook, which will help to provide Baltic exporters the stability and predictability they need to plan for the future. But our new trade strategy is not limited to imports and exports. It will help to make Europe better in a wider sense. For the first time, we are putting sustainability at the heart of trade policy. This means finding better ways for trade to contribute to our climate change and environmental ambitions. We are also determined that trade will contribute to the digital transformation of our economies. The Baltic states are home to many innovative digital companies which export their services across the globe. E-commerce rules, if agreed at global level, will create legal certainty for them. Finally, I want to explain how our commitment to strengthening our trade relationships in coming years will help to make Europe better. Transatlantic relations are now in much better place since Biden administration took office in Washington. Last week, we had a major breakthrough that we mutually agreed a 4-month suspension of tariffs in the Airbus-Boeing dispute. This will immediately help our exporters and give us a space to find a definitive negotiated solution for this long-running dispute. We are optimistic that we can restore shared transatlantic leadership as an engine for positive global change, because there is no stronger alliances than those based on shared values. To conclude, I believe that trade policy is clearly helping to make Europe and our Baltic states better. And it can do even more if we work together to leverage our strong potential. The Baltic region and Europe as a whole can look to the future with confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrovskis, for initial remarks of this conversation. And I'd like to pose a question related to what you just very strongly emphasized. You were emphasizing the need to cooperate more with the United States, and the strong transatlantic link has always been one of the priorities of the Baltic states. And you were saying that there is a need to work with the US in reforming World Trade Organization, also trying to write together new rule book for the world trade. And it is a very important, and this is a very good timing, but there are also challenges. And for instance, one of the challenges could be an impact of EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment that US was quite critical about, or EU strive for the strategic autonomy. So what challenges do you see in the forthcoming future working together with the United States in terms of reforming world trade and the environment of world trade?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Indeed, EU-US relations are very important for us because we are strategic partners. We are like-minded partners, and it's very clear if EU and US are working together, we can be a positive force for the good globally. And this is what we already outlined from European Commission side already in December. We outlined our intentions for a new start of transatlantic partnership, and currently we are already in intensive contacts with Biden administration to develop this in different directions. So talking specifically on trade, I already mentioned one major step which we just took by suspending Airbus Boeing tariffs, which gives us now time to negotiate the question of future disciplines in area of civil aviation and put this dispute behind us. There are some other trade irritants which are there from Trump era, for example, steel and aluminium tariffs, where we also should be working to resolve this bilateral trade dispute. But what is also very positive is that US is now back at the multilateral table. So it bodes much better for our efforts to reform the World Trade Organization. And World Trade Organization requires a reform because appellate body is not functioning. Negotiating function is also not performing too well. So that's why, together with our new trade strategy, we presented a detailed reform plan for the World Trade Organization. And we are working with US how to advance also reform of WTO forward. Then when we discuss China, indeed, this is one area where we also need to cooperate with US because many of the challenges posed by China concerning, for example, industrial subsidies and transparency of industrial subsidies, forced technology transfers, intellectual property rights, and so on, and so role of state-owned enterprises. We share the same concerns with US, so it's important that we work together, both bilaterally, trilaterally, also with Japan, within WTO, and that's in a sense what we already are doing. On our EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, which was concluded in principle at the end of last year. First of all, the main aim of this agreement is to address economic imbalance in our relations, because the economic relations between EU and China are not balanced. EU is much more open to Chinese companies and Chinese investments than China is for EU companies. So it's in that sense asymmetric agreement to address asymmetric situations. So there are substantial new commitments on China on market access, on level playing field, also on sustainable development. And there are actually very little new commitments from EU. We are basically preserving our level of openness. And it must be said that many of the global partners already have deals of some kind with China, including United States, which has their phase one deal, including other partners. Recently, there was regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement agreed in Asia. So in a sense, EU also had some catching up to do because we were only major economy not having any kind of agreement with China. And as we are not saying that phase one deal of United States prevents us from cooperating with US on China, I think the opposite is also true concerning the a comprehensive agreement on investments, that it's not preventing US from cooperating with us on China, and that's exactly what we intend to do.
Thank you. And don't you think that strategic autonomy, Europe's move towards strategic autonomy could be a challenge as well in terms of cooperation with the United States? For instance, involvement of United States in the PESCO projects or European Defense Fund?
Yeah, well, first of all, talking about strategic autonomy, it's worth to emphasize that we are talking here about open strategic autonomy. And in the new trade strategy, we, in a sense, defined what we mean with this in terms of trade. And in terms of trade policy, we are clear that we remain committed to open, fair, and rules-based trade, while at the same time becoming more assertive, defending our interests and rights when third countries are not playing by the rules. And that we are willing to act multilaterally whenever we can, but we will be ready to act unilaterally if we must. So that's how we define this approach from trade policy. So clearly we remain committed to multilateralism, and I think that's a good basis of work. Well, on European Defense Fund, on some EU defense policy initiatives, something which we have been always very much emphasizing, that these initiatives need to be designed in a way that is complementing the NATO, not competing with the NATO, and that's exactly how those initiatives are being designed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dombrovskis, on also clearing up the situation regarding the strategic autonomy and trade. And now I'd like to pose a bit wider question. I know that you are working now a lot with trade issues, but during this time of crisis, European Union is also initiating a lot of reforms. And you in particular know that each crisis could be turned in a wonderful opportunity. If you do a smart reforms, you can achieve a lot. And now with the European Union Recovery Fund, with the political will to do something to move forward, European Union has a wonderful chance to move towards future-ready economy. And so what do you foresee in the forthcoming years? What would be the main steps in the European Union in terms of reforming European economy, but also reforming trade within the Europe?
Yeah, on the question of reforming European economy. Well, this question has been addressed extensively in a context of current crisis. So already before the crisis, we announced work towards what we call green and digital transformations of our economy, reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. So when the crisis came, the question was what is happening with our goals? And we were very clear that we will continue to work towards these economic transformations, because it's also a matter of, so to say, staying ahead of the curve and not falling back in those developments internationally. And correspondingly, we designed our tools to support economic recovery in a way that it also helps green and digital transformations of our economy. And for this, we now have substantial financial resources. So the next multi-annual financial framework for 2021-2027 and the European Economic Recovery Plan together is 1.82 trillion euros. So it's the largest support package ever agreed at the EU level. And as regards European Economic Recovery Plan, 750 billion euros for the first time is going to be financed by joint borrowing of at the EU level. So in a sense, it will help member states to restart their economies while not putting immediate burden on member states' budget deficits and debts. And what we are emphasizing with this recovery plan, and the main instrument with this recovery plan, recovery and resilience facility, that first, it's important that member states address structural weaknesses in their economies, and that's why we insist on addressing the challenges identified in country-specific recommendations, which had been addressed to member states. So to come with reforms to address those challenges. And we insist on a green and digital transformation with a mainstreaming goals of 37 and 20% correspondingly. So what is happening right now is that member states are preparing their recovery and resilience plans, and we expect that most of those plans will be ready for submission by the end of April. And it's very important that member states reflect those European priorities of green and digital transformation in their plans, and also address country-specific structural weaknesses. Thank you.
I already would like to invite the participants to raise their hands and pose the questions. I see only one question posed on chat, but until I can see more hands and questions, I want to have a very particular question related to what you have said already and related to the Baltic states, because a lot of people from the Baltic states are watching this conversation. And in these reforms related to the recovery and reforming the European Union towards digitalization and a more green attitude, way of life, Baltic states, how do they fit? Because they have very particular economies. They are small, a lot of SMEs, but also they are very flexible. So what is there for the Baltic states?
As regards Baltic states, I would say Baltic states' economies are, in a sense, fitting well in this concept of green and digital transformations. Well, on digital, already touched upon during the introductory speech. In many areas of digitalization, of economy, of public services, Baltic states are actually among the front runners in the EU, also in terms of development of digital infrastructure. So from that point of view, there is a good starting point on which to advance further. One area where we see some concern, it's not limited to Baltic states, but also in Baltic states, is a shortage of digital skills. So skills development will be very important as we go forward with the digitalization of the economy. Also on green transition, there are many initiatives where Baltic states can engage. So just to show some work directions which we have outlined, improvements in energy efficiency, and there is a lot to do in Baltic states, especially in housing sector. Rolling out of electromobility, further increasing the share of renewables, just to give some examples for which also the funding of recovery and resilience facility can be used. So, and the fact indeed that Baltic economies are quite flexible will allow them to adjust successfully to this green transformation. And also in a context of green transformation, skills will be very important because nature of economy will be changing. Also, it means requirements in the labor market and jobs, nature of jobs will be changing. So that's very important that there is a developed system of not only, so to say, education and people gaining skills, but also reskilling and upskilling throughout the working life. That's, I would emphasize as a important element where more focus should be put on. And another element is a question of research and innovation and funding for the research and innovation, because their Baltic states generally fit in a category what we call modest innovators, and there is certainly a scope to do more.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrovskis, very much for the answer. And I don't see so far the raised hands, but it seems that we have a question in chat. So let me pose this question, and then we'll see, maybe someone will be more interested in to ask the question. So the question is, what are the plans of the European Commission to make the internal market relevant again for European businesses? It's a quite provocative question.
First of all, I would say that European Union internal market is very relevant for EU businesses. Maybe it's not always seen, or maybe it's often taken for granted. So in a sense, one can see maybe some examples of the relevance of internal market at the example of Brexit. Because we see that UK's decision not only to leave the EU, but also to leave the internal market has led to quite substantial disruption of trades and supplies between EU and UK. And the reason for this is exactly the absence of EU internal market. So suddenly there are borders, there are customs controls, there are sanitary, phytosanitary checks, you name it. So suddenly, if you are outside the single market, there are much more work, much more formalities to be covered. So in a sense, maybe it's even a good sign that many people take EU internal market for granted, and the benefits what this internal market is bringing for granted. But it's true that we need to develop internal market. We need to continue remove the barriers within internal market which still exist, especially in services sector. So further work is needed, and this work is being done. We need to develop further the digital single market. Already previous European Commission started to work in this direction, because also in digital rules are relatively fragmented, and that's probably one of the main reasons why we are lacking digital giants in the EU, because when we look at the startups, when we look at the so to say people's ideas, entrepreneurial spirit, it's all there. But when you look then down the road, what companies do to scale up, they often move to US, they move to Asia, and the main reason is fragmentation of the digital market within the EU. If you're confronted with 27 different sets of rules, of course it creates a problem. So developing of digital single market, I would say it's a next important milestone for the single market.
Thank you very much for the answer. And now we have the first hand raised. It's Mr. Šešelgyte. I am not sure if I'm pronouncing your surname in a correct name. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. My name is Šešelgyte. I'm from Denmark. I'm a board member of United Nations Association in Denmark, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much. I should have been with you last year in person, but due to Corona, it wasn't possible. I know that this issue right now is trade, but in the introduction to this meeting, the conference on the future of Europe was mentioned, and I just want to ask the Commissioner, how do you see this joint declaration was signed by, for example, Ursula von der Leyen Wednesday, and I'm looking very much forward to have this dialogue across borders about how do you see Europe in the future. So I hope it's okay to ask this question, and thank you so much for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Hitpe. And Mr. Dombrovskis, could you please answer this question? And I see that there is another one, another hand being raised.
Yeah, indeed. So the conference of the future of Europe, in a sense, work has started, and indeed the leaders of three European institutions, European Commission, European Council, and European Parliament, signed a joint declaration. There is a board now preparing the conference of future of Europe, which has started the work, and the launch event is now planned for 9th of May. So the work is ongoing, and as it was outlined, of course, it will imply a series of dialogues, series of discussions. It's maybe the name is a bit misleading. It's not one conference. Indeed, to house this engagement with citizens, with different stakeholders, and to discuss how we are actually moving forward. But in a sense, now the work is just the beginning, so it's important that we are getting this feedback and then drawing conclusion based on the feedback which we'll be receiving during this series of events under this conference of future of Europe, so to say, brand.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrovskis, and I see one more hand being raised, Mr. Andris Gobinch. Andris Gobinch.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I hope it's possible to hear me.
Yes.
But no video, which is strange, but whatever, I'll ask the question. I would like to thank the Vice President for his presentation, and as you were referring to the RRF as well, and to the country-specific recommendations, I would like to come back to this issue, as we from civil society perspective were very supportive for the social aspects in the country-specific recommendations, and we were focusing on these as well in suggesting several ideas for the RRF. The strange thing, and where I would be very happy for your advice and comments, is that the dynamics in Latvia were very specific in designing the RRF. The programs were designed quite late, only in December. First drafts were started to be consulted with wider civil society. And as a result, we are now in a situation where although the European Commission strongly criticizes the Latvian program, it seems that only very slight and decorative changes will be made, with a big problem that these social aspects, which mainly are linked as well to a strong civil society involvement and stakeholder involvement in making all EU investments really effective, are lacking. What might be your comment on this? How can we better convince our ministries, which are in charge of these aspects, to take this stakeholder involvement, civic participation more serious, which always the Commission has been stressed? And you know the situation from inside as well, the dynamics in the Ministry of Finance in Latvia, and as a Prime Minister also these aspects. So perhaps you can comment on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gobinch. Mr. Dombrovskis?
Yeah, well, on the preparation of Latvian recovery and resilience plan, the work is ongoing, and I would say in many aspects the work is going in the right direction. So if we talk on the broader European priorities, on the green and digital mainstreaming, on the reforms addressing country-specific recommendations. Obviously, more work there is needed. More ambition, so to say, in the reform agenda may be wished for, including as regards the social aspects, as exactly you mentioned, but this work is currently ongoing, and a plan is still in the preparation. So I think we'll be really able to judge the plan once it will be finalized. So, but broadly speaking, the work is going in the right direction. On engagement of social partners, of civil society, indeed, that's something which the Commission is emphasizing very strongly. Actually, yesterday morning, I was in a plenary debate in European Parliament where exactly the question of the implementation of partnership principle, involvement of regional and local authorities, social partners, civil society was discussed very strongly. And I was very clear that the European Commission will continue to pay a strong attention also to this aspect. So, but all in all, I would not be as critical. I think that the work is going in the right direction, and there is still a bit of time. As I said, we normally expect submission of the plans by end of April. So I'm confident that Latvia will get its plan in good shape by that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And we have the last question, although just a few minutes to answer it, but I think that we are still on time. And this question comes from Slido. What would you suggest for the Baltic states in terms of trading with Russia? Should they continue or rather abandon it, reorienting towards the European Union instead? Very Baltic question.
Well, as regards trade with Russia, it must be said that this reorientation of trade has been taking place already for many years, and the share of Russia in Baltic states external trade had been continuously decreasing. Important factor in this regard was also Russia's embargo, which was introduced in 2014 following EU sanctions on the illegal annexation of Crimea. Well, you know, those are in any case choices to be made by economic operators. We know that Russia is a very difficult market, very unpredictable market. We do not have a specific free trade agreement with Russia, so we are trading on WTO terms. But in any case, what I can outline is that with this new trade policy approach, we will be more insistent of third countries actually following international rules. In case of Russia, as I said, it's WTO rules, as we do not have bilateral trade agreement. In this sense, protecting our companies, especially our SMEs, against unfair practices. So one can say that we'll be becoming more assertive in defending our companies, but we all know that Russia is a very difficult place to operate in.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dombrovskis, for your answer and for, in general, a very sincere and interesting conversation. I'm afraid that our time is over. Just want to wish you good luck with all the reforms, both internally in the European Union, but also good luck in reforming the world trade environment and writing a good rule book which represents European values. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And now we are moving to the next panel in 15 minutes. And the panel will be dedicated to Europe after the stress test for democracy. Thank you very much for listening to us. And now we have a break for 15 minutes. Bye.